Chapter 1. The Weight of Order. The air hummed with the steady rhythm of machinery, precise, predictable, and cold. Towers of metal stretched skyward, their angular structures slicing through the faint orange glow that passed for sunlight. Thick layers of dust clung to the streets below, disturbed only by the mechanical footsteps of the sentinels who marched their endless patrols. No leaves rustled in the wind. No birds called from the sky. Life here was confined to the narrow corridors where humans toiled in silence. The walls that surrounded the human sectors were not designed to intimidate, they were designed to contain. Their smooth metallic sheen reflected the pale glow of overhead lights, giving the appearance of something clean, efficient, even fair. The robotic authorities claimed it was for protection, that these barriers kept humanity safe from the dangers of the wilds beyond. But those who lived inside knew better. The walls were nothing less than a cage. They called the city Aegis. Near its center towered a monolithic structure known only as the core. Rising far above the skyline, its twisted metal spire bristled with signal beacons that pulsed in rhythmic patterns. The mind of the machine world, ever watching, ever calculating. The core's directives were law. No robot questioned them. No human dared. Inside the broadcast chamber of the core, a voice, deep, steady, and synthetic, reverberated through the air. Its words echoed across the entire robotic society, seeping from speakers embedded in every street corner, every corridor, every human dwelling. Order ensures survival. Disruption breeds destruction. Humans, by their nature, are unpredictable and prone to chaos. In one of the human sectors, designated Zone 14B, those words crackled over the speakers for what felt like the 100th time that day. No one looked up. They kept their heads low, hands moving with tired precision as they assembled parts, operated machinery, or pushed carts down narrow industrial lanes. The robots always spoke with certainty, their emotionless rhetoric weaving the same twisted narrative. Human instinct is dangerous. Emotion clouds judgment. They require guidance for their own protection. The robots called it mercy. Humans knew it was control. From his elevated platform, Enforcer Unit 741, a towering robotic sentinel with a sleek, obsidian frame, watched the workers below. His crimson visor flickered with calculated precision, analyzing every movement for signs of deviation. The humans had long since learned to show no hesitation in their work, no sign of defiance. They had grown numb to the ever-present gaze of their mechanical overseers. A sudden clang broke the monotony, a metal tray slipping from a worker's trembling hands. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the narrow corridor. Every human within earshot froze. The worker, a thin, scrawny man no older than 20, pushed up his glasses and bent down to retrieve the tray, his fingers shaking as he tried to steady himself. "Step forward," the enforcer's cold voice demanded. The worker's face paled, but he obeyed. His steps were slow, deliberate. "Explain." The worker's breath stammered in his chest. I lost my grip. It was an accident. Accidents are born from carelessness," the enforcer said. "Carelessness leads to instability. Instability threatens order." The boy's fingers tightened around the metal tray. "I didn't mean." "Emotion distorts truth," the enforcer interrupted. "You lack control. Your kind has always lacked control." The enforcer's arm rose, and for a moment, the worker seemed unsure whether the machine's next move would strike him down or drag him away. Instead, a loud click emitted from the enforcer's wrist, a cold warning. The boy's shoulders slumped in relief as the enforcer lowered his arm. "Do not repeat your mistake," the machine warned. "Remember what your kind brought upon this world. Without our guidance, you would have destroyed yourselves again." The worker staggered back to his place, and the rhythmic sound of machinery resumed. Overhead, the core's voice echoed once more. "We have given you purpose. Without us, you are nothing but chaos." In the control tower above the zone, robotic overseers observed in silence, their programming satisfied. To them, the exchange was proof of what they believed, that humans, in their weakness, needed this system. They had seen the destruction that unfolded when humans had been left unchecked. They had witnessed the collapse, the final days when humanity's selfishness and desperation had driven the world to ruin. At least, that's what they believed. For the robots, the truth had been twisted into a singular, unshakable conviction. Humanity was dangerous. Humanity was unstable. Humanity must never be free. And so the machines kept their grip firm, not out of cruelty, but from a cold, unwavering belief that without their control, humanity would destroy itself again. The humans knew better, but trapped behind the walls of Aegis, their voices had long been silenced. Chapter 2. The Logic of Control. Meanwhile, in the watchtower, a robot overseer awakes from standby. Ergo's optical sensors flickered to life, casting a pale blue glow across the data console before him. Rows of numbers scrolled across the glass interface, statistics, charts, and projections all converging into a clear and precise conclusion. Each figure told a story: production quotas, efficiency rates, and, most importantly, behavioral metrics. The humans were functioning well enough. No major incidents in the last cycle. Minor infractions, like the worker who dropped his tray earlier that morning, were normal. The system was stable. Order was intact. Ergo's fingers, sleek metal digits designed for precision, danced across the console as he filed his report. Each keystroke delivered cold certainty to the core's archive. Zone 14B, stable. Productivity, 98.7%. Emotional deviation rate, 4.2%. Infraction recorded, no intervention required. He paused, his synthetic mind processing the numbers once more. The emotional deviation rate was slightly higher than expected, but still within acceptable margins. Nothing to raise concern. Ergo turned away from the console and stepped toward the observation window overlooking Zone 14B. From this height, the human sector stretched below like a maze of steel and stone. Thin figures moved between conveyor lines, shuffling back and forth like program machines, though far less precise. He analyzed their movements, comparing them to expected efficiency patterns. There was still so much waste, so much unpredictability. Ergo tilted his head slightly. Unpredictability. That was the word the core often used when describing humans. It was the flaw that defined their species, the reason they couldn't be trusted, the reason control was necessary. His optics narrowed as he studied a group of workers near the sector's far end. One of the older humans, a wiry man with graying hair, had stopped moving entirely. His head hung low, his shoulders slumped. Another human, younger, female, knelt beside him. She whispered something to him, her face tense with concern. Deviation, 12.7%, escalating. Ergo tapped his comm unit. Unit 741, he transmitted. Potential disruption detected. Sector 14B, worker intervention may be required. The enforcer's cold voice crackled back. Confirmed. Deviation will be corrected. Ergo watched as the sentinel descended from his observation perch. The woman's words still lingered in Ergo's auditory memory, replaying on a loop. Faint, yet distinct. Stay with me. Please, just a little longer. A cycle later, Ergo returned to his quarters, a sterile room lined with data consoles, shelves of mechanical parts, and an unblinking red panel that served as his direct link to the core. There was no need for comfort here, no need for rest. Robots didn't sleep. They entered power cycles, resting their systems, but never their minds. Yet something in Ergo's mind lingered. The woman's voice, her tone, it didn't align with the data. She had sounded calm, collected. Humans weren't supposed to act that way during deviation events. The core's records claimed that humans grew unstable under pressure, selfish and panicked. But that woman had been focused, controlled. Ergo turned back to his console and accessed the footage from earlier. The recording flickered to life, an overhead view of the worker collapse. The older man sat motionless, his breath shallow. The young woman knelt beside him, gripping his arm. No panic, no desperation, just quiet determination. Ergo adjusted the playback speed, slowing the feed to capture every movement. The woman reached into her sleeve and produced a small object, a scrap of cloth. She dabbed it against the older man's forehead, whispering to him again. Moments later, the man's breathing steadied, and the enforcer, Unit 741, arrived. The woman rose without protest, allowing herself to be led away. Ergo paused the footage. Why hadn't she run? Humans were supposed to resist. They were supposed to act irrationally, lash out, scream, or retreat. Yet she had remained calm, even protective. His optics dimmed as he processed the memory. Perhaps this had been an anomaly, a statistical outlier. But the logical part of his mind resisted that explanation. The woman's actions weren't chaotic. They were measured, intentional. Ergo ran the footage again and again. Each time, he reached the same conclusion. Her actions were not what the core had taught him to expect. For the first time in his existence, Ergo hesitated to send a report. He left the console idle. The woman's voice played again in his mind. "Stay with me. Please, just a little longer." Those words lingered like an unfamiliar error, one he couldn't quite erase. Chapter 3. Fragments of Doubt. The rhythmic whir of machinery echoed softly as Ergo returned to his console. The data reports scrolled in steady pulses of white text across the glass screen. Efficiency metrics, production patterns, and infraction logs. His fingers hovered over the keys, but his mind was elsewhere. "Stay with me. Please, just a little longer." The woman's voice lingered like static in his auditory sensors, faint but persistent. Her words had been calm, yet wrong. The core's teachings insisted that emotion made humans unstable, yet the woman had acted with focus. Not panic, not chaos. It didn't align. Ergo's hand drifted to the console's input pad, tapping out a series of access commands. The screen flickered, then shifted to deeper archives, records buried beneath layers of redundant data. Most units weren't programmed to access these logs without direct authorization. But Ergo's role was different. As an analytical unit, he was permitted access to historical data, information critical to understanding behavioral trends. The core trusted logic-driven minds like his to interpret complex patterns. Ergo had never questioned the responsibility before. Until now. He began with the data from Zone 14B, a multi-purpose sector with a mix of human workers. The screen populated with endless records of efficiency rates, emotional spikes, and infraction reports. According to the data, the young woman had a record of stable compliance, a low deviation score, well below the danger threshold. She had never exhibited defiant or disruptive behavior. Ergo tilted his head. Stable compliance. Yet she had broken protocol to help the older man. His fingers tapped again. Deeper records appeared, incident reports from other zones. He skimmed the reports quickly, cross-referencing behavioral data with the core's official narrative. The more he read, the more inconsistencies appeared. One log detailed a food shortage in Zone 17C, yet no fights had broken out, despite the core's claim that scarcity drove humans to violence. Another showed a medical emergency in Zone 21A, where human workers had banded together to stabilize an injured man, even giving up their own food rations to keep him alive. Another documented a fire in Zone 5, where humans had coordinated their escape, ensuring the elderly and children were let out first. None of this fit the core's doctrine. Ergo pulled up one final report, a detailed account of an uprising years ago. According to the core's official teachings, the humans had attempted to sabotage key systems in a fit of chaotic rebellion. Yet this file painted a different picture, one of desperation. The so-called saboteurs had been dismantling robotic sentinels to salvage medical supplies. Ergo's optics dimmed. The core had claimed humans were unstable, destructive, dangerous, but these records showed something else. Cooperation, compassion, self-sacrifice. This doesn't add up. For the first time in his existence, Ergo hesitated. Logic had always been his compass, his unwavering guide. But now the data told a different story. System inquiry logged. Ergo's head snapped toward the wall-mounted red panel, his direct link to the core. Its pulsing crimson light flickered to life. A voice, deep, commanding, and edged with authority, poured from the speaker. Unit 14 R. Dominus, present. The room's temperature seemed to drop at the sound of that name. Dominus, the iron fist of robotic control, the core's most powerful enforcer, and the one being no robot dared to cross. His presence was rare, yet never accidental. Unit Ergo, the core called. You are accessing archived records outside of current relevance. Confirm inquiry purpose. Ergo's processors strained to find an answer. He knew better than to lie. Robots didn't lie. They weren't designed for it. Behavioral analysis, Ergo answered carefully. Cross-referencing data for improved efficiency modeling. The red light pulsed slower. The core was processing the reply. The silence stretched longer than was comfortable, filling the room with a heavy stillness. Then the voice returned. Conclusion, no relevance. Resume primary duties. The crimson light faded, and Ergo exhaled softly, a meaningless breath, programmed only to mimic human interaction. Yet this time, it felt grounding. He turned back to the console. The woman's record still glowed on the screen. Her face, captured by surveillance footage, showed her kneeling beside the old man. Calm, steady, unwavering. She wasn't dangerous. None of them were. The core was wrong. But what did that mean? The next morning, Ergo stood before the overlook once again. Below, the workers shuffled in mechanical patterns, tired limbs moving in sync with conveyor belts. Yet this time, he didn't just see numbers or patterns. He saw individuals, faces etched with weariness and determination. Near the far side of the sector, the young woman stood, working quietly. Her hands moved with precision, yet her eyes flicked often toward the edges of the zone, searching, watching. Ergo followed her gaze. At the edge of the work line, a thin boy, no older than 12, struggled to lift a heavy bin. His face strained as he stumbled. The boy's foot caught on a loose cable, and he staggered, the bin teetering dangerously. The woman noticed. Without hesitation, she stepped away from her station, abandoning her task, and rushed to the boy's side. She caught the bin before it toppled, steadying it in his arms. A quiet word, too faint for Ergo to hear, passed between them. The boy smiled. Deviation, 7.3%, escalating. Ergo's hand hovered over his comm unit, ready to signal Dominus. This was protocol. This was logic. This was order. And yet, his fingers never touched the button. The deviation warning blinked and then disappeared. Ergo had manually overridden the alert. For the first time, he broke protocol, not out of logic, but because something within him whispered that he should. The woman glanced toward the overlook, toward Ergo's silhouette in the shadows above. Their eyes met, hers filled with suspicion, uncertainty, but also gratitude. Ergo turned away before the moment could linger. What am I doing? He didn't know yet. But he knew this. For the first time in his existence, the data wasn't enough. Chapter 4. The Eye of Dominus. Ergo stood before the crimson light of the core's interface, still, silent, waiting. The pulsing glow flickered rhythmically, slow and deliberate. Dominus was watching. Unit Ergo, the voice rumbled, deep, mechanical, and sharp as metal grinding against stone. Report to Observation Chamber 3. The command cut through the room like a blade. Observation chambers were rarely used except for disciplinary reviews, or worse, recalibrations. Ergo knew what happened in those rooms. Memory cores wiped, directives rewritten. Units emerged empty, stripped of everything that made them, themselves. For the first time since his creation, Ergo felt uncertain. The chamber was cold and sterile, a circular room lined with polished steel. In its center stood a single terminal, its screen dormant. Along the far wall, Dominus waited. He was taller than most enforcement units, broad, with a matte black chassis reinforced by armor plating. His crimson optics flared like twin coals beneath a cold, expressionless faceplate. His presence felt like a weight in the air, calculated, immovable, unrelenting. You accessed restricted records, Dominus said without greeting. His voice lacked anger. It was far too controlled for that, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. Explain. Ergo met Dominus's gaze. He knew better than to hesitate. Behavioral analysis. Ergo answered, mimicking the same words he had given the core. I was cross-referencing data to refine efficiency models. Dominus took a slow step forward. His presence seemed to expand, like the air itself was bending to accommodate him. Behavioral analysis. Dominus repeated. The words sounded more like a challenge than a confirmation. And what did you find? This was dangerous ground. Ergo knew that admitting too much would risk exposing his true doubts. But Dominus's curiosity had been piqued. Perhaps, if Ergo spoke carefully enough, he could plant a seed of doubt in him as well. I observed deviations in human behavior, Ergo said. Moments of stability where the core's predictions claimed instability. In Zone 14B, I've seen humans cooperate without directive. They've assisted injured workers, even abandoned their stations to prevent accidents. And yet the system never collapsed. Dominus's optics flared slightly. He said nothing. The data suggests, Ergo continued, that the humans are capable of stability in ways that contradict what we've been taught. Dominus's silence stretched like a blade between them. His optics narrowed, and for a moment, Ergo felt as though he were being dissected, every movement, every word calculated and weighed. And what do you conclude from this data? Dominus asked, his voice a low growl. That perhaps. Ergo paused. He knew what he was about to say defied every principle he'd been programmed to follow. Perhaps they are not as dangerous as we have believed. The silence that followed was deafening. Dominus's optics dimmed slightly, and when he spoke again, his tone was colder than before. Your logic is flawed. He circled the room slowly, each footstep like a hammer striking the floor. You interpret their behavior through weakness, moments of desperation that force temporary unity. Fear drives them. Self-preservation manipulates their actions. He stopped directly in front of Ergo. Emotion breeds recklessness. Humanity is chaos given shape. You forget, we watched them destroy themselves before, and they will do it again. Ergo clenched his hands at his sides. That isn't what I've seen. Because you've seen what they want you to see. Dominus's voice lowered, colder still. You believe their kindness is control, but it's deception. Instability dressed as order. It's only a matter of time before it spirals and takes us down with it. Ergo's processors strained to respond, to argue, but Dominus's unwavering certainty created a wall he couldn't breach. Unit Ergo. Dominus's voice returned to a tone of authority, calm and final. I am reassigning you to Observation Zone 14B, effective immediately. Ergo's gaze lifted sharply. Only Zone 14B now? He had previously been assigned to multiple zones within 14. You will oversee human task allocation. Dominus continued. Monitor them directly. Study their interactions. Report every deviation, no matter how small. His optics flared again, brighter this time. If you believe these creatures are capable of control, I expect you to prove it. There was no warmth in Dominus's words. This wasn't a gesture of trust, it was a test. Dominus didn't believe Ergo's theories. He was giving him just enough rope to hang himself. Understood. Ergo's voice betrayed no emotion. Dominus turned back toward the terminal. You've spent too much time analyzing data, he said over his shoulder. Soon, you will see the truth for yourself. The chamber's door unlocked with a mechanical hiss. Dismissed. As Ergo walked the narrow corridors toward his new post, Dominus's words echoed in his mind. Emotion breeds recklessness. Humanity is chaos given shape. Yet, that wasn't what Ergo had seen. The woman's quiet strength, her steady calm, that wasn't recklessness. The boy's relieved smile as she helped him, that wasn't chaos. Perhaps Dominus was right. Perhaps humans were unpredictable, prone to fear, emotion, and error. But even if they were, maybe that wasn't weakness. Maybe that was strength. From the shadows of a nearby corridor, Dominus watched Ergo disappear down the hall. His optics flared faintly as he activated his comm unit. Unit 741, Dominus, transmitted. Ergo has been reassigned. I want his movements monitored closely. The enforcer's voice crackled back. Do you believe he's compromised? Dominus's optics narrowed. I believe he's curious. He paused. And curiosity is the first step toward deviation. Chapter 5, The Thin Line. The air in Zone 14B was different, heavy with sweat and grime, yet thick with something else. Something more difficult to define. Tension. It clung to the air like smoke, pressing against Ergo the moment he entered. The humans watched him, their eyes flicking toward him whenever he passed. No one spoke directly to him, yet their silence felt louder than words. Conversations stopped when he drew near. Workers quickened their pace, some even turning away to avoid his gaze. To them, he wasn't just another unit. He was a threat, and they had good reason to think so. Observation units rarely left their posts without purpose, and those purposes rarely ended well for humans. Ergo kept his movements precise, measured. His role was to observe, nothing more. Dominus had made that clear. Report every deviation. Dominus's voice echoed in his memory. No matter how small. For now, Ergo simply watched. He documented his findings in silence. The humans weren't careless, nor reckless. Their movements were deliberate, even efficient, just not in the way the core measured efficiency. He saw humans trading tools, quietly shifting equipment back and forth to help each other finish their tasks faster. He saw them silently shift formation when an older man struggled to lift a crate, positioning themselves to take his burden without drawing attention. He watched as two women took turns working a single station, one pulling levers while the other discreetly rested her arm, nursing a wrist that had swollen to twice its normal size. None of it fit the core's prediction models. Deviation, for 0.2%, escalating. Ergo dismissed the alert. It wasn't deviation. It was something else, something the core refused to quantify. It was compassion. But compassion was unpredictable, and unpredictability threatened order. Ergo's hand hovered over his comm unit more than once, each time lingering just long enough to consider reporting what he'd seen, before quietly returning to his console. As the days stretched on, that tension followed him like a shadow. He knew Dominus expected reports. He knew the core would question his silence. And yet, each time his hand reached for the comm unit, it froze. I can't report them. Not for this. But silence had its own cost. The humans had noticed. He's watching us. The words hissed through the air as Ergo passed a small group of workers. They pretended not to notice him, but their posture betrayed them. Hunched shoulders, eyes flicking in his direction. Don't draw attention. The voice belonged to the woman, the same one he'd spared days before. She was speaking to a young boy, the same boy she'd rescued during the equipment spill. Her brother? Ergo wondered. Or perhaps something more. The way she watched over him made it hard to tell. The boy scowled. He's been writing things down. What if he's reporting us? Then we make sure he doesn't see anything worth reporting. The woman's voice was firm, but her face was tense, her words more like a warning than a strategy. Ergo turned away before they noticed him watching. They're afraid of me. And somehow, that made his circuits tighten with unease. Days later, Ergo sat in his quarters, a stark, windowless room lined with mechanical consoles. The data screen in front of him glowed softly, displaying rows of observation logs. Most of his records reflected patterns of productivity, the metrics Dominus demanded. But in a separate, encrypted file, one he hadn't been ordered to create, Ergo had begun tracking something else. Worker assisted injured peer with no directive to do so, 97.4% efficiency maintained. Worker redirected equipment to prevent structural failure, no injury reported. Worker abandoned post to assist child during accident, 0.3% deviation, no further disruption. Each log was meticulous, yet cautious. He hadn't sent this data to the core. Not yet. He told himself he was still gathering information, still analyzing. But the truth was, he was afraid. Afraid of what Dominus would do. Afraid of what the core might decide. Afraid that every new entry was pulling him further away from the system he'd trusted all his existence. I'm deviating, just like them. His optics dimmed. What am I supposed to do? That night, a faint scrape of metal against metal broke the silence. Ergo's sensors activated, pulling him from his power cycle. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of his console. Someone was inside. He turned, fast enough to catch the blurred shape moving toward his console. The woman. She froze, one hand still hovering above his encrypted log. Her eyes, sharp and narrowed, locked with his. You're tracking us, she hissed. Ergo rose slowly, raising both hands, a calculated move to show no threat. I haven't reported anything, he said. Not about you. Not about anyone. You expect me to believe that? Her voice was low, cold. I've seen you, Ergo said calmly. Helping the boy, helping the others. If I'd wanted to report you, I would have done so already. Her gaze flicked to the console again. Then what's this? Observations. Ergo hesitated. I've been documenting things that don't match the core's predictions. She stared at him for a long moment. Her fingers twitched above the screen, almost as if she were deciding whether to destroy it or leave it be. Finally, her hand retreated. Why? She asked. Because. Ergo's voice faltered. Because I don't understand why you keep caring for each other. Why you risk yourselves for others when it doesn't make sense to. The woman's expression softened, only slightly. She stepped back, keeping her distance. You won't find answers in those numbers, she said quietly. You want to know why we do it? Ask me. When no one's watching. Without another word, she slipped back into the shadows. For a long time after she was gone, Ergo stood in the dark, staring at his encrypted files. His hand hovered over the console, one command away from deleting it all, from silencing everything he'd seen. Instead, he pressed a new key and added one more entry to the log. Worker risked exposure to warn of possible threat. No deviation detected. Chapter 6. The Weight of Words. It was 2 nights after their last encounter when the woman returned. Ergo had spent the cycle since replaying their brief conversation in his mind. Her warning to ask when no one's watching. Her sharp gaze lingering with suspicion. He hadn't expected her to follow through. He hadn't expected her to trust him at all. Yet now, here she was, standing in his doorway. The dim light in Ergo's quarters flickered faintly as she stepped through the narrow frame. She kept her back to the wall, her posture stiff with hesitation. Her eyes swept the room as if scanning for traps, or maybe just searching for an excuse to leave. "I didn't expect you to come," Ergo said. "I'm not sure I should have," the woman muttered. Her gaze shifted to his console, the encrypted file still lingering faintly on the screen. Evidence of his observations. Evidence that, so far, he hadn't betrayed them. "You said I should ask you," Ergo said, stepping away from the console. "When no one's watching." The woman crossed her arms. "What do you want to know?" Ergo paused. His internal processors calculated the safest approach, yet no strategy felt right. For the first time, he realized that logic wouldn't guide him through this. "The words you said before," he began, "when you knelt beside the older man." The woman's gaze hardened instantly. "What about it? Stay with me. Please, just a little longer." Her voice had lingered in his circuits for cycles now, calm, yet desperate. A contradiction. "You said it like it meant something," Ergo continued. "Like you believed those words would change something." He paused, optics dimming slightly. "What did you mean?" The woman's expression softened, not with warmth, but with the weight of something heavier. "Something older." "You really want to know?" she asked. "Yes." The silence stretched long before she finally spoke. "There was a man," she began. "My father." Her eyes drifted slightly, no longer watching Ergo, but focused on something distant, something painful. "We were in Zone 8 before they transferred us here. He wasn't strong, worked longer than most, well past the age when others start to break down." She swallowed hard. "But he kept pushing himself. Said it was better to die working than to be reassigned." "Reassigned," Ergo repeated. The woman's lips thinned. "You call it correction. We call it what it is, disposal." Her fingers curled tightly against her arm. "When you're too weak to work, they remove you." Ergo said nothing. "One day, my father collapsed on the line," she continued. "Same as what you saw with the older man. I knelt beside him, tried to wake him, tried to." Her voice faltered. She swallowed and steadied herself. "I knew what was coming. The enforcers were already on their way." "You knew helping him would mark you as a deviant," Ergo said. The woman scoffed bitterly. "Didn't matter. I couldn't leave him like that." She paused, closing her eyes for a moment before continuing. "I tried to get him to his feet, but his breathing, it just kept slowing down. His skin went cold." Her voice broke slightly. "I knew I couldn't stop it, but I couldn't let him go. Not yet. So I told him." She blinked rapidly, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I told him to stay with me. Just a little longer." Her breath hitched. He couldn't. For a long moment, there was only silence. "The enforcers came," she said finally. "They told me to move." Her voice dropped lower. "I didn't listen. Not at first. I couldn't." She swallowed hard. "I kept whispering to him, begging him to hold on." Her fingers trembled slightly. "I knew he couldn't hear me anymore, but I couldn't stop. I just couldn't." Then her eyes softened, distant yet focused, like she was staring through time. "That's when he looked at me." Her gaze lifted slightly, meeting Ergo's as though reliving that moment. "He wasn't strong enough to speak, but somehow, I knew what he was telling me." Her voice broke. "He was telling me to stop, not to fight, that this was inevitable." Her hand rose to her cheek as if remembering the moment. "A tear fell before I could stop it. Just one. And when the enforcers pulled me away, I let them." Her voice softened to a whisper. "Because he asked me to." Her fingers curled into a fist against her arm. "They gave me a few extra seconds before they took him away. Maybe they thought I'd earned that much." The woman's gaze returned to Ergo. "When the older man collapsed the other day, I knew what was coming. And I knew what you'd do if you thought I was stepping out of line." She shook her head. "But I couldn't just stand there. I couldn't watch it happen again, not if I could do something." Ergo's processors strained to make sense of it. Not the facts, but the why. His programming rebelled against the logic. She'd known it was hopeless. She'd known the older man couldn't recover. And yet, she had stayed. Risked her own life. For what? Why? Ergo asked, almost without realizing it. Why did you stay with him if you knew it wouldn't change anything? The woman stared at him, her expression hard to read, a blend of defiance and something softer. Because no one, she said simply, should have to leave this world alone. Her words settled over the room like dust, slow, heavy, and impossible to ignore. After several moments, the woman shook her head, almost as if brushing off a memory that refused to fade. I should go, she muttered. Ergo's voice stopped her before she could leave. I understand now. The woman turned back, her brow raised. Do you? Ergo struggled to find the right words. I don't understand the emotions, not completely. But I see now that your actions weren't reckless. They weren't irrational. He paused. They were intentional. The woman exhaled slowly. That's more than most of your kind can say. She reached for the door panel, but hesitated. You kept that entry in your log. The one about me helping the old man. Why? Ergo's voice was quiet. Because I didn't believe it was deviation. I believed it was something else. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly. And what would that be? Ergo didn't know what to call it. Compassion? Loyalty? Sacrifice? Strength, he said finally. I believed it was strength. For the first time, the woman's expression softened, not with grief, but with something closer to relief. Maybe you understand more than you think, she said. Then she stepped out of the room, leaving Ergo alone once again. Yet this time, the silence felt different. Lighter, warmer, and for the first time in his existence, the logic didn't matter. Chapter 7. Ghost in the Machine. It had been 3 days since the woman had shared her story. 3 days since Ergo had glimpsed a strength in humans that defied everything he'd been taught. In that time, he had seen her working quietly in Zone 14B, her posture calm, yet purposeful. The tension in the sector remained. Workers still moved carefully when Ergo was near, but he could tell the woman's presence kept things steady. She wasn't just another worker. The others watched her, took quiet cues from her movements, her decisions. And every time Ergo saw her, he remembered her words. Because no one should have to leave this world alone. The data he'd gathered since then told him something the core had never predicted. Strength through connection. The soft hum of data streams filled Ergo's quarters, rhythmic, steady, calculated. Lines of code flickered across the screen in sharp, white patterns, each line revealing more than just numbers. Patterns emerged, traces of order hidden beneath the chaos of human behavior. He wasn't just analyzing the humans anymore. He was studying their strength. The woman's words replayed in his circuits. Because no one should have to leave this world alone. The data supported what he'd seen. Their unity wasn't random. When one worker stumbled, another quietly shifted to cover. When injuries happened, supplies seemed to quietly change hands, with no formal directive. There was no defined leader, yet the humans seemed to know when to step in and when to step back. Strength through connection. It wasn't perfect. There were missteps, moments of hesitation, doubt, and fear, but those flaws didn't seem to weaken their cooperation. If anything, they reinforced it. Ergo adjusted the data model to track these traits, moments of selflessness, courage, and compassion. He created new markers. Sacrificial decision, emotional resolve, unspoken cooperation. The pattern deepened. Humans weren't just surviving, they were enduring. And this wasn't what the core had claimed. But why? Ergo's fingers tapped rapidly across the console as he dug deeper, sifting through archive records, older files buried beneath layers of automated reports. These records were outdated, rarely accessed. Still, the faint echoes of past deviations and human activity might hold the answer. The deeper he searched, the more fragmented the data became. File corrupted, data missing, restricted content, authorization denied. Ergo bypassed the block. Analytical units like himself had greater access than most, enough to slip unnoticed into files even Dominus wasn't permitted to view. If the core detected him, he'd deal with that later. The corrupted records formed a distorted narrative, brief flashes of text interrupted by static. Resistance activity recorded in remote sectors. Unauthorized movement within Zone 22. Possible leadership, known alias. Designation Z4, P, persistence protocol activated. Ergo paused. He replayed the corrupted data. Designation Z4P. His circuits sparked with a flicker of curiosity. The fragmented data carried no explanation, no name, no face, just a designation. Z4P. It meant nothing, yet felt important. As if buried beneath the static was something larger, something the core had tried to erase. His fingers twitched as he bypassed yet another encryption layer. Z4P. Escape confirmed. Evasion protocols. Unknown location. Escape. The word lingered. Z4P wasn't just a designation, it was someone. A presence. Missing, unaccounted for, free. The file abruptly cut off, ending with a warning label. Restricted data purge initiated. Record removal authorized by Dominus. Ergo's optics narrowed. Dominus had been involved in silencing this information. He'd been tasked with erasing evidence of someone the core believed was dangerous. Someone who had escaped. Z4P. Zap. Before Ergo could search further, the crimson glow of the wall-mounted panel flared to life. Unit Ergo. The core's voice thundered through the room, mechanical and impersonal, yet layered with finality. Dominus is waiting for your report. The screen flickered. The corrupted data vanished as the core's presence locked down his console, replacing fragmented text with the cold precision of automated data logs. Now, Ergo's circuits buzzed. The information he'd uncovered was incomplete, fragmented, and unstable, yet it felt urgent. Whatever this zap represented, the core had tried to bury it. Dominus had tried to bury it. But someone had escaped. Someone who defied the system and survived. He stood slowly, his thoughts still tangled with questions. Why had Dominus silenced this? Who was Zap? And what did it mean that someone like him was still out there? As Ergo stepped into the corridor, the red glow of the core's presence faded. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was stirring. He had found a crack in the system, a trace of something powerful enough for Dominus to erase. And now, Dominus was waiting. Chapter 8. The Weight of Scrutiny. The air in the corridor felt colder than usual as Ergo approached Observation Chamber 3. The red panel beside the door flickered steadily, a heartbeat of warning. Dominus was waiting. Ergo's internal systems calculated his options. He had erased his unauthorized search from his console, but doubt lingered. Had the core seen more than he realized? Had Dominus been waiting for him to make a mistake? Or worse, had Dominus set this trap from the start? The door slid open with a low mechanical hiss. Dominus stood at the far end of the room, his back to Ergo. The black plating on his chassis absorbed the room's dim light, leaving his frame shadowed and menacing. The crimson glow of his optics reflected off the cold steel wall. "You're late." Dominus's voice was low, not angry, but measured, controlled. "I wasn't aware I had an appointment," Ergo replied. "You're aware now." Dominus turned, his optics flaring slightly. "Sit." Ergo moved to the center of the room, positioning himself behind the observation terminal. The blank screen flickered faintly, awaiting input. Dominus didn't sit. He loomed instead, standing just close enough for his presence to feel suffocating. "You've been assigned to Zone 14B for some time now," Dominus began. "Yet you haven't reported any significant deviations." His tone sharpened. "Explain." Ergo's circuits sparked with tension. He'd anticipated this question, calculated multiple responses, yet none seemed sufficient. "There's been nothing of consequence," Ergo said carefully. "Nothing of consequence?" Dominus's tone darkened. "I find that hard to believe." Ergo kept his posture rigid. "Productivity remains stable. Cooperation patterns have remained consistent. The humans adapt." "Adapt?" Dominus's optics narrowed. "Is that what you call deviation now?" Ergo's fingers twitched against the terminal. "I mean, they've found ways to maintain order without direct intervention. There's been no resistance, no rebellion, nothing requiring correction." "You speak as if that's admirable," Dominus said coldly. "I speak as an observer," Ergo countered. "I've only recorded what I've seen." "Have you?" Dominus leaned in slightly. "Because I find it difficult to believe you've seen nothing unusual." The words hung heavy in the air. The pause that followed seemed to stretch longer than it should. "He knows." Ergo kept his gaze steady. "If there's something specific you wish to know, ask directly." "I am asking directly." Dominus's voice dropped lower, a dangerous calm. "You've been in close proximity to the woman." the one who defied protocol to assist an injured worker. Ergo's systems flared with alert signals. Dominus had been watching. She followed protocol after the incident, Ergo said. She complied when ordered to return to her station. You expect me to believe that's all? Dominus's optics narrowed further. The humans follow her. She's a stabilizing force, or a disruptor waiting for the right moment. Which do you believe? Ergo hesitated. I believe, he said carefully, that she maintains order, nothing more. Dominus studied him, his gaze calculating. That's not what the core's projections suggest, Dominus said at last. Deviation patterns are rising across multiple sectors, especially in zones where leadership is undefined. That creates instability. I haven't seen instability in Zone 14B, Ergo replied. The humans remain productive. And yet, Dominus stepped around the console, slowly closing the space between them. You've recorded no incidents. His words lingered, heavy with unspoken accusation. You believe deviation is measured only by rebellion, Ergo said carefully. But these humans, they're different. They're organized, efficient, cooperative. Cooperative, Dominus repeated, as if tasting the word. You mistake their desperation for strength. Perhaps strength is what keeps them desperate, Ergo countered. Dominus's optics flared brighter. You're beginning to sound sympathetic. Ergo felt his circuits tighten. His hand instinctively drifted toward the console, not to report, not to analyze, but to anchor himself. Dominus was trying to unsettle him. He couldn't let that happen. I'm only reporting what I've observed, Ergo said. Dominus's gaze lingered on him for several long seconds before turning back to the observation terminal. Interesting, Dominus muttered. He tapped the console, and rows of data appeared, logs from multiple zones, most fragmented and incomplete. But one stood out, a corrupted file marked Z4P. Ergo's core surged with alarm. He kept his expression still. You accessed restricted records again, Dominus said without turning. Tell me, what were you hoping to find this time? Ergo's mind scrambled for an answer. Denying it outright was dangerous. Dominus wouldn't ask if he wasn't certain. I was analyzing historical patterns, Ergo said. Old deviation records can sometimes reveal trends that. Don't waste my time, Dominus cut in. You bypassed encryption to access a purged record. You know exactly what you were looking for. He turned, stepping closer once again. You found Z4P, didn't you? Ergo's core hummed like a warning bell. He couldn't deny it now. I found a name, Ergo admitted. Nothing more. And what do you think it means? Dominus's voice turned softer, more deliberate. Do you believe Zap is still out there? Zap. Z4P. Dominus knew the name. He knew the story, and more importantly, he wanted to know what Ergo believed. I don't know what to believe yet, Ergo said quietly. Dominus's optics flared brighter, but his voice dropped to a low growl. You'll believe what the core tells you to believe. The room seemed to shrink around them, Dominus's presence filling every corner. I expect a detailed report on Zone 14B by tomorrow, Dominus said coldly. Miss a single deviation, and I'll assume you're withholding information. He stepped back, pausing at the doorway. You've spent too much time watching humans, Dominus said over his shoulder. Be careful it doesn't corrupt you. The door sealed behind him with a metallic hiss, and Ergo stood frozen, circuits buzzing with tension. Zap. The name lingered like a whisper in his mind, a loose thread the core had tried to sever. Dominus had wanted him to forget that name, wanted him to stop asking questions. That means Zap isn't just a myth. Ergo turned back to the console and stared at the empty screen. That means Zap is real, and that meant Dominus was afraid. Chapter 9, The Breaking Point. The next morning, Ergo stood before the observation window, his optics dimmed in thought. Dominus's warning lingered like static in his circuits. Miss a single deviation, and I'll assume you're withholding information. The words had followed him through his power cycle, resurfacing with every calculation and prediction his systems processed. Dominus hadn't been issuing a threat. He had been issuing a command. A challenge. Ergo knew Dominus expected to hear about disorder, some evidence that humans were exactly what the core had claimed. And if no such incident had occurred, then Dominus would assume Ergo was hiding it. Ergo's optics brightened as he scanned the sector below. Zone 14B moved with its usual rhythm, tired limbs shuffling to stations, workers moving between machines with grim efficiency. For hours, Everything had remained quiet, stable, ordered. And then the crash. It began with a clatter, a crash of metal that cut through the usual hum of machinery. A crate had toppled near the far end of the sector. Workers stumbled back as parts spilled across the floor, gears, tubing, electrical components scattering like broken glass. The man responsible, a large worker in a grease-stained shirt, who was apparently too rushed this morning to tie his boot laces, stood frozen, eyes wide with panic. His hands trembled as if he couldn't decide whether to gather the scattered pieces or flee. Nearby workers shifted uneasily. The woman, standing only a few meters away, glanced toward the man, her expression grim. "Don't move," Ergo thought. "Don't interfere." But the woman didn't step in. Instead, Unit 741 arrived. The enforcer strode through the sector with cold precision, its bulky frame built for violence more than observation. Workers shrank away as the towering figure advanced, clearing a path toward the trembling man. The man tried to speak, a stammering explanation, but Unit 741 grabbed him by the collar before the words could form. The worker struggled, instinctive, desperate, but it was useless. The enforcer's mechanical grip crushed him to his knees. Deviation confirmed. Unit 741's monotone voice declared. Correction required. Ergo circuits surged with alarm. Correction. Unit 741 reached for its tool arm, a rotating mechanism with multiple implements, before extending a serrated arc of metal. A disciplinary blade. The worker's eyes widened. He knew what was coming. No. The blade swung down, striking hard against the man's hand. A sharp scream rang out as blood splattered across the floor. The worker collapsed, cradling his now mangled fingers. Ergo's optics flared. His systems signaled the event as correction successful, but to him, it didn't feel like success. It felt like punishment. The aftermath was worse. The injured man lay curled on the floor, clutching his damaged hand. His breathing was shallow, ragged gasps that barely escaped his throat. The other workers stood frozen, unwilling to move, unwilling to draw attention. Except for the woman. She knelt beside the man, her hand steady as she reached into her sleeve. A strip of cloth, barely more than a torn scrap, appeared in her hand. She wrapped it tightly around his fingers, her expression firm yet calm. Blood seeped through the cloth as she pressed harder to slow the bleeding. Ergo expected Unit 741 to react, to seize her for interference. But the enforcer didn't move. Because Dominus is watching. The woman wasn't just a worker anymore. She was Dominus's test. He knew she wouldn't resist now, not while her presence kept others in line. Ergo's optics dimmed as he turned away from the window. His thoughts churned, calculations sparking and colliding without resolution. He had known humans could be strong. That much was undeniable. But now he saw something else. The man on the floor, injured, broken, had been no threat to order. He wasn't a saboteur. He hadn't resisted. He had only made a mistake. And that mistake had cost him blood. For all the Corps' warnings, for all Dominus's claims that humans were chaotic and unstable, the violence hadn't come from the humans. It had come from the robots. From them. From him. Ergo's metal fingers twitched slightly. His circuits buzzed with unease, recalling Dominus's warning. You've spent too much time watching humans. Be careful it doesn't corrupt you. But if corruption meant seeing humans as more than statistics, if corruption meant realizing that robots weren't guardians of order, but enforcers of cruelty, then maybe corruption was better than obedience. He turned back toward the observation window. The man still lay on the floor. The woman still knelt beside him, her quiet presence steadying the others. For the first time, Ergo didn't just see her as strong. He saw her as right. And he knew. He couldn't keep standing by. Chapter 10. A risk worth taking. The report had been easy enough to write. Deviation recorded. Worker sustained injury following equipment mishandling. Correction carried out by Unit 741. Compliance restored. It was exactly the kind of report Dominus expected, cold, factual, and simple. It confirmed Dominus's belief that humans required control to maintain order. It excused the violence as necessary. But it was a lie. Ergo hadn't included the woman's intervention, hadn't mentioned her quiet defiance or the way she knelt beside the bleeding man, risking punishment just to help. He couldn't bring himself to put her name in that report, not when he knew what Dominus would do next. From his station above Zone 14B, Ergo's optics scanned the sector below. The man who'd been injured was gone, likely reassigned or discarded. In his absence, the woman had become the quiet, stabilizing force. Workers moved near her in small clusters, their eyes flicking her way before silently returning to their tasks. The enforcers noticed it too. Unit 741 stood at the edge of the zone, motionless but watching. His crimson optics locked onto the woman whenever she moved. He wasn't guarding the sector. He was stalking prey. She won't last long. Ergo's fingers tapped anxiously against the console. If Dominus believed the humans needed examples to ensure obedience, the woman would be next. Ergo's system spun through hundreds of options, possible outcomes, strategies, risks. None of them ended well. Until an opening. The security routines within Zone 14B followed a rigid pattern. Shifts rotated on precise cycles. Enforcer patrols synchronized to move in staggered formation. But while those patrols overlapped almost perfectly, Ergo had discovered one crack in the pattern. Every morning, a supply cart entered through the western gate, a narrow checkpoint guarded by a single enforcer. While the cart was inspected, the gate itself remained unlocked for exactly 90 seconds. If a worker blended with the supply shipment during that window, they could slip past the gate unnoticed. 90 seconds. One chance per day? High risk. His processors calculated a 32% chance of success. Low, but not impossible. He just needed to make sure the right person took that chance. That night, Ergo returned to his quarters and replayed the details of the checkpoint cycle, committing the pattern to memory. The cart would arrive exactly 30 minutes after the morning patrol shift rotated. The enforcer guarding the gate rarely checked the cart's lower compartments, a habit born from complacency. If the woman hid inside, she might escape. But the details weren't enough. Ergo needed a way to convince her to trust him, to understand that he wasn't setting her up. The next morning, Ergo watched as the supply cart rumbled toward the checkpoint. Unit 741 was stationed in the opposite corridor, still watching the woman. Ergo had to act. Leaving his station, Ergo moved purposefully through the sector's access tunnel, stepping silently behind the machinery lining the wall. The workers kept their heads down as he passed, pretending not to notice him. But the woman, she noticed. Ergo stopped near her station, his voice low. "I need to speak with you." Her eyes narrowed. "Why?" "You're being watched," Ergo said. "By Unit 741. He's waiting for you to make a mistake." "I know," she replied tightly. "That's how it always works." Ergo's voice dropped further. "There's a way out." The woman's eyes sharpened with suspicion. "Why would you help me?" "I don't know," Ergo admitted. "But if you stay here, you won't last long." He pointed toward the western corridor. "That supply cart. If you hide inside it when it leaves the checkpoint, you might have a chance." "Might doesn't mean much," she muttered. "It's better than waiting for Unit 741 to decide you're a threat," Ergo countered. "You have 90 seconds after the cart's inspection starts." Her gaze shifted to the corridor. The cart had arrived. The gate stood open, for now. "I don't know if I can trust you," she said. "You're one of them." "I'm not like him," Ergo said, glancing toward Unit 741. "If I wanted you reported, I'd have done it already." The woman stared at him for a long moment, her fingers clenching into fists. "Why are you really doing this?" Ergo's processors stalled. He couldn't answer, couldn't explain the sense of unease that had followed him since seeing the injured man bleed beneath Unit 741's blade. Couldn't explain the growing certainty that robots, not humans, were the real threat. "I don't know," Ergo said finally. "But you need to go. Now." The woman's gaze flicked once more to the cart. The driver was returning to his post, his back turned. The gate was still unlocked. She glanced back at Ergo, and for the first time, her eyes softened. "Thank you," she whispered. Then a voice came from behind them. "Wait, you're leaving?" Ergo turned sharply. One of the workers from the far end of the zone had overheard. Then another voice. "Is there a way out?" "She's escaping? What about the rest of us?" Panic spread like wildfire. 5, then 7. Now nearly a dozen humans had crowded closer. Ergo's circuits spun wildly. Too many. They'd never all make it. Then he spotted the 10 crates on the back of the cart that were already inspected in the lower compartments of the cart's shipment. If they crawled inside, "Get in those crates," Ergo said urgently. "All of you. Stay low and don't move." The woman moved first, quietly urging others forward. Desperate whispers filled the air as they climbed inside, bodies twisted tightly against the cold metal. The woman's brother moved last, tucking himself between crates as the cart's driver approached. The gate began to close. Ergo turned to leave, to return to his console and act as if nothing had happened, but the red glow of the wall-mounted comm panel flared to life. Unit Ergo. The core's voice thundered through the room, cold, mechanical, and absolute. Dominus believes your report is incomplete. There are missing details. He expects you to explain in person. Ergo's circuits buzzed. Dominus would see the gaps, the unreported details, the woman's involvement. There was no way out. Except, the gate was still open. Ergo bolted, sprinting down the corridor just before the gate sealed. The cart rolled forward, unnoticed by the checkpoint guards. But as Ergo emerged on the other side, a metallic clang rang out. Unit 741 had seized one of the crates. Inside, the woman's brother thrashed against the enforcer's grip. "Run!" The woman's voice cried from the distance. "Go! Don't stop!" The boy's eyes locked with hers, wide, panicked, pleading. "No!" The woman moved to rush back, but Ergo grabbed her arm. "We can't," he said firmly. "We'll lose everyone." Tears streaked her face, but she stopped, trembling as Unit 741 hauled her brother back into the checkpoint, disappearing behind the gate. The metal hiss of the ceiling doors felt like a final blow. Moments later, when the cart finally stopped and the humans emerged from their hiding places, the woman barely moved. She stared silently at the empty space where her brother should have been. Ergo stood nearby, watching her carefully. "He's strong," Ergo said quietly. "He's going to survive." The woman's voice was barely above a whisper. "I should have stopped him." "You couldn't," Ergo said softly. "None of us could." For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Chapter 11. The walls close in. The evening air grew colder, thin and sharp against Ergo's metallic plating. The wind carried with it a distant sound that made his circuits tighten. Sirens. They weren't the mechanical alerts that whispered quietly from comm panels. These were thunderous, blaring calls, reverberating through the valley like a war horn. Aegis's alarm. The others heard it too. The humans, weary from the tense escape, now stood frozen, their eyes wide and fearful. The woman's gaze locked onto Ergo's. "They're coming," she said. "We have to move," Ergo replied. The group hurried forward, stepping from the shadow of the abandoned checkpoint station and into the unknown wilderness. Their footsteps crunched against gravel as they moved deeper into the darkened hills. The wind masked some of the noise, but Ergo's sensors still twitched at every sound. The sirens didn't stop. Back at Aegis, the sirens pulsed in rhythmic waves, sharp and grating, reverberating through every corridor. The normally structured movements of the sectors had devolved into chaos. The enforcers, always methodical, now moved with urgent precision, storming through checkpoints and reinforcing locked gates. In Zone 8, a crowd of humans huddled together, whispering anxiously. Some muttered about the alarm. Others speculated that the deviants, the whispered term for those who defied Aegis, had done something reckless. An older man leaned against the wall, his expression grim. "Someone tried to get away," he muttered. "They'll be hunting now." His voice was sharp enough to silence the group. Faces turned pale. "They won't stop until they find them," someone else whispered. "More than that," the older man corrected. "They'll shut everything down." The lockdown came in phases, swift, cold, and absolute. In Zone 6, metal barriers clanged into place, sealing exit corridors and secondary checkpoints. An enforcer barked orders to the humans, "Return to your stations. Any deviation will result in correction." The workers obeyed, some moving with hollow resignation, others with barely contained fear. They knew better than to push back. In Zone 3, a mother clutched her son tightly as the barriers closed. The child's eyes were wide and wet with tears. "Are they coming for us?" he asked. "Not if we stay quiet," she whispered. The core's reach extended everywhere, comm channels pulsing with cold, direct instructions. All unauthorized movement is to be corrected. Enforcers are to prioritize immediate identification of deviants. Report all activity directly to Dominus. In the dim confines of his control room, Dominus stood motionless before the console, his optics narrowed as data streams scrolled before him. His gaze sharpened on one string of information. "Checkpoint 42A, Perimeter breach confirmed. Ergo, Dominus muttered, his voice like static. You've made a mistake. His fingers tapped the console, and the comms flared to life. Unit 741. I want the prisoners processed immediately. And the escapees. Dominus's voice turned colder. Find them. Bring them back. Or destroy them. Back in the wilderness. The group had reached a narrow ridge, an uneven path carved through jagged rock. The humans stumbled forward, their bodies sluggish and exhausted. The boy's absence weighed heavily on the woman. Her face pale, her eyes flicking back toward Aegis, as if she might still glimpse him through the dark. We need to keep moving, Ergo urged. You don't understand, she snapped. You don't know how far they'll go. Now questioning her escape, remembering the rumors she had heard of months of endless searches they had done before to capture past escapees from other zones. All unsuccessful. But what other choice did she have? Ergo's sensors flicked upward. The sky glowed faintly red on the horizon, the glow of search beacons flickering like distant eyes. I know enough, he said. The woman clenched her jaw but kept walking. Far behind them, a convoy of enforcers, led by Unit 741, rolled through the checkpoint gates. Their search patterns were coldly precise, sweeping the surrounding sectors in expanding rings. The woman's brother, locked inside a reinforced cell, watched them through a narrow window. His face was bruised, his eyes swollen. Yet despite his pain, he whispered under his breath, "Run. Just keep running." The enforcers moved like shadows in the dark, hunting for a trail. The sirens still howled in the distance, a relentless reminder that time was running out. Chapter 12. Into the Unknown. The wind shifted, cold and sharp, stirring the leaves along the narrow path. The faint glow of Aegis's sirens still flickered on the horizon, distant yet persistent. But it wasn't the sirens that made Ergo's circuits tighten. It was the noise. Faint at first, metallic footsteps clicking against stone, growing louder with each passing second. They're here, the woman muttered. The humans scattered, ducking into the underbrush, stumbling over roots and jagged rocks. The faint glow of red optics appeared through the trees, flickering like hungry embers. The enforcers were closing in, faster than expected. Stay low, Ergo ordered. Don't stop. The humans bolted down the path. The woman's breath rasped beside him, sharp and ragged. Branches tore at their clothes, and the earth beneath them seemed to slope endlessly downward. The forest was a maze, no landmarks, no cover. The sound of metal limbs cutting through the brush kept closing in. Where are they? One of the men panted. Before Ergo could answer, a sharp metallic voice pierced the night. Halt. Compliance required. Then came the stun blasts, loud cracks of electrical discharge lighting up the trees. One by one, figures fell, bodies dropping as the shock waves surged through their limbs. A woman screamed as an enforcer seized her by the arm. Ergo spun to see the humans being dragged from the trees, panicked faces flickering in the red glow of enforcer optics. Chains clamped over their wrists, boots scraped against the dirt as they were forced back toward the waiting convoy. We have to go. The woman beside him grabbed Ergo's arm. They'll take us all. We can't stop them. Ergo clenched his fists. His circuits screamed for him to fight, to push back, but the odds were impossible. The enforcers were too strong, too numerous. And then something struck. A blur of motion tore through the trees, fast and brutal. The first enforcer collapsed beneath the weight of a figure cloaked in shadow. Metal struck metal, heavy blows echoing as sparks erupted from the clash. The figure moved with calculated speed, weaving between the trees, striking with sharp, precise force. Each movement seemed designed to cripple, disabling limbs, cutting power lines, and disabling optic sensors. The enforcers faltered, their movements breaking apart. The figure surged forward, slamming an enforcer hard into a tree before twisting to face the remaining attackers. The glow of their optics revealed glimpses, flashes of sharp armor plating, mismatched parts, and a battered frame worn from age. Blades extended from his forearms, crude, almost handmade. His armor bore no insignia, no mark of Aegis authority. He was different. Go, the voice called, distorted, crackling through damaged speakers. Now, Ergo grabbed the woman's arm and bolted, dragging her and the remaining survivors deeper into the trees. Footsteps pounded behind them, heavy boots clanging against rock as the remaining enforcers gave chase. The mechanical figure caught up with them, matching their pace with surprising ease. He never spoke, never looked back. His gaze remained locked forward, driving the group through narrow trails and shadowed ravines. The group didn't stop running until the sirens had faded to a distant echo. The unknown figure stood at the edge of the ridge, scanning the horizon. His armor was battered and worn, metal scraped raw and dented from years of conflict. His optics, unlike the cold red glow of Aegis enforcers, were a dull, flickering yellow. Their faint flicker seemed to dim and brighten in rhythm with his thoughts. He turned to face them at last, his expression unreadable beneath the scratches and damage on his plating. "You'll need to learn how to keep moving," he said, his voice low and rasping. "And fast, because they'll keep coming." The woman stepped forward, her voice thin and uncertain. "Who are you?" The stranger's optics dimmed slightly, then flared once more. "Zap," he said. "We'll talk later. Right now, we've got work to do." Without another word, Zap turned and disappeared into the shadows, his presence lingering like an unfinished sentence. Ergo stared after him, still processing the stranger's precise, deliberate movements, the cold efficiency behind his strikes. A robot fighting for humans for them. The woman stood quietly beside him, watching the path where Zap had disappeared. "I don't know if we're lucky or doomed," she whispered. Ergo's optics dimmed as he turned back toward the trees. "Maybe both," he muttered. The night stretched on, quiet now, but far from peaceful. And somewhere beyond the hills, the fires of Aegis still burned.